In the stillness of night, a family's past comes roaring back in flames. The night Riverbend burned was hotter than any summer storm Clara Whitmore could remember. She stood barefoot on the dirt road, the hem of her nightgown clinging to her ankles, watching as fire swallowed her family's ancestral home. The air was thick with smoke and ash, the orange glow painting the heavens like judgment itself. Neighbors gathered in silence, their faces lit by the blaze. Nobody dared get too close. The fire seemed alive, crackling with a hunger that no bucket of water could quench. Clara's son Daniel stood at her side, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. "Ma," he said, his voice low but steady, "that fire wasn't an accident." Clara didn't answer. She couldn't. The Whitmore house had stood for nearly 2 centuries, every brick soaked in memories. Weddings, funerals, Christmas mornings, whispered arguments behind closed doors. And now, in one night, it was reduced to smoldering ruin. The sheriff's men arrived late, as usual. Their lanterns bobbed through the haze, shadows dancing against the trees. One deputy muttered, "Lightning strike, maybe?" But Daniel shook his head. "Not a cloud in the sky," he replied, pointing to the empty heavens. Clara turned toward him, her face streaked with tears and soot. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't start with suspicions." But Daniel knew better. Too many old debts, too many grudges tied to the Whitmore name. This wasn't chance. It was revenge. By dawn, the flames had died down, leaving only blackened beams jutting from the earth like broken bones. Clara's hands trembled as she picked through the wreckage, finding half-melted picture frames, fragments of china, the charred remains of her late husband's rocking chair. Each relic was another wound. The sheriff, an aging man with weary eyes, finally approached. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently, "we'll investigate. But truth is, there ain't much left to go on." Daniel stepped forward, fire still in his voice. "Somebody set this. And we both know folks in this town have been waiting years for a chance like this." Clara caught his arm. "Daniel, stop. This family's carried enough feuds. I won't bury another son over Riverbend's sins." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. His silence spoke louder than any words. That night, Clara sat alone on the porch of the guest house, staring across the fields at the smoking ruin. The air was heavy with memory and grief. She thought of her sister Rebecca, estranged for decades, gone without a word since the day of their father's funeral. Rebecca had warned her once, "The Whitmore name will only bring fire." Clara shivered. She hadn't heard from Rebecca in 30 years. But as the flames devoured Riverbend, Clara felt the echo of her sister's voice more clearly than ever. And then, just before dawn, Daniel found something half buried in the ashes, a silver lighter, engraved with initials neither of them recognized. The metal was warm but intact. Daniel held it up, his eyes dark. "Ma," he said, "this wasn't just fire. This was a message." Clara stared at the lighter, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she felt the past closing in. The family secrets, the old debts, the promises broken long ago. A horse's hooves echoed down the road, and out of the morning fog came a figure on horseback. A woman, face veiled, carrying herself with quiet authority. Daniel narrowed his eyes as the rider approached. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She knew that posture, that silence. It was her sister. After 30 years, Rebecca had returned to Riverbend. Sometimes the past doesn't knock, it rides straight to your doorstep. The sound of hooves struck a rhythm against the dirt road, steady and deliberate. The figure drew closer, and Clara felt her stomach twist. After 3 decades of silence, her sister Rebecca was riding back into Riverbend like a ghost resurrected by fire. Daniel stepped forward, protective by instinct. "Who's that?" he demanded, though the suspicion in his eyes already carried an answer. The rider dismounted slowly, boots crunching against gravel. She removed her veil, revealing a face both familiar and foreign. Rebecca Hayes had aged, deep lines carved by time, hair streaked with silver, but her eyes, sharp and unwavering, were the same ones Clara had stared into as a child during endless summers under the Riverbend sun. "Hello, Clara," Rebecca said, her voice low, deliberate. "It seems the house finally met the fate it was destined for." Clara's throat tightened. "Rebecca." Her lips trembled around the name. "Why are you here, after all these years?" Rebecca didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked past Clara at the smoldering ruin of Riverbend. "Because," she said finally, "fires don't just start themselves, not in this town. And not when it comes to our family." Daniel frowned. "You know something." Rebecca turned her gaze on him, studying him the way a hawk studies prey. "You must be Daniel. You've got your father's jawline, and his stubbornness too, I imagine." Clara stiffened. "Leave his father out of this." Rebecca gave a humorless smile. "Impossible. This fire, it's the echo of something he started long before Daniel was born." The words sliced through the morning fog like a blade. Clara felt her pulse race. For 30 years she had buried the truth, hidden it beneath layers of silence. Now, with the fire's smoke still lingering in the air, Rebecca had come to rip the past wide open. Later that evening, the three of them sat inside the guest house, shadows flickering against the walls from an oil lamp. Daniel leaned forward, the silver lighter on the table between them. "Tell us what you know," he demanded. Rebecca traced her finger along the table's edge, slow and deliberate. "That lighter, I've seen it before, belonged to a man named Walter Keene. He ran with your father back in the 70s. Smuggling, bootlegging, you name it. They called themselves the Rivermen." Daniel's brow furrowed. "My father? No. He was strict, honest, Rebecca cut him off, her tone sharp. "Your father was many things, Daniel, and honest wasn't one of them. He and Walter built an empire in this town. But greed tears even the strongest bonds apart. When it collapsed, debts were left unpaid, enemies left unforgiven." Clara clenched her fists. "Stop it, Rebecca. You left. You don't know what it was like after he died." Rebecca's gaze softened for a moment. "I left because I knew this day would come, because Riverbend was always going to burn." Silence filled the room. Daniel's mind raced. If Rebecca was telling the truth, then the fire wasn't just revenge. It was unfinished business from decades ago. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Then who said it? If Walter Keene's been dead 10 years, who holds the grudge now?" Rebecca's lips pressed into a thin line. "Walter had a son, same age as you. Quiet boy, but I heard whispers he inherited more than just his father's name. If he's here, then Riverbend's not done bleeding yet." The oil lamp flickered, and outside a dog barked in the distance. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of memories pressing against her chest. She had prayed the past was buried, but the fire was proof. It was alive, clawing its way back into the present. Daniel picked up the lighter, staring at the engraved initials. "W.K.," he whispered. His eyes narrowed. "Walter Keene. Then that means—" He looked up at Rebecca, voice shaking with realization. "The man who set this fire isn't just after revenge, he's after us. Some truths don't die with age, they wait for the right night to resurface." The morning after Rebecca's return, the Whitmores received a visitor. Sheriff Caleb Boone, his badge long tarnished by time, walked up the gravel path with the slow gait of a man carrying both age and secrets. His hair had turned to snow, his frame stooped, but his eyes, sharp and searching, still commanded silence when he entered a room. "Clara?" He greeted with a nod, tipping his worn hat. "Heard your sister's back." His gaze shifted toward Rebecca, who stood by the window, arms crossed. A flicker of recognition passed between them, an unspoken history. Daniel stepped forward, holding out the silver lighter. "Sheriff, this was found in the ashes. Belonged to Walter Keene, right?" Boone's eyes darkened. He took the lighter in his weathered hands, thumb brushing over the engraving. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a sigh, he handed it back. "Where'd you get that name?" Boone asked, his voice low. "Rebecca told me," Daniel said. Boone's jaw tightened. "Then she's told you enough to know you don't want to keep digging." Rebecca's laugh was bitter. "Still hiding, Caleb, even after all these years?" "Enough," Clara snapped. "This family has bled too much over the past. If you know something, Sheriff, speak plain." Boone looked at Clara, his old friend, his voice heavy. "Your husband, Clara, James Whitmore, wasn't the man folks believed him to be. He and Walter Keene ran half the county's business out of shadows. Whiskey, guns, sometimes worse. I looked the other way because, well, everyone owed them something. Riverbend survived on the money they pulled in." Daniel's face hardened. "My father? You're lying." But Boone shook his head. I wish I was. When their partnership split, it turned bloody. Walter vanished one night, and rumor was James had a hand in it. Never could prove it. Never wanted to. But plenty of folks believed. And grudges, Daniel, they don't fade, they wait. Rebecca turned to Clara, her voice sharp. So you knew. All those years you defended him, raised Daniel in the lie of a good man. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. I knew some, not all. And what I knew, I carried to my grave, until this fire forced it back. Daniel felt the room tilt. The man he had idolized, the father he had tried to emulate, now stood painted as a criminal. A killer. His chest tightened. He wanted to shout, to deny it, but the silence of those around him was louder than any words. Boone cleared his throat, shifting his weight. There's more. Walter Keene's boy, William. Folks called him Billy. He left Riverbend after his daddy disappeared. Heard he went north, ran with rough crowds. But 2 months ago, I got word he was back. Didn't think much of it then. Now, with this fire. Rebecca's lips curved in a grim line. So Billy Keene has come home to collect his father's debt. The weight of her words hung in the air. Clara pressed her hands to her face, whispering, Dear God. Boone leaned on his cane, voice weary. Listen to me. If Billy's back, he won't stop at burning a house. He'll come for blood, your family's blood. Daniel stood, his resolve hardening. Then let him try. I won't hide. If he wants us, he'll have to face me. Boone shook his head slowly. You don't understand. Billy's not just a boy seeking revenge. He's a man shaped by hate. And he knows secrets. Secrets about your father that even I never told. Rebecca stepped closer to Boone, her eyes narrowing. What secrets, Caleb? The old sheriff hesitated, his hands trembling against his cane. Finally, his voice cracked. Your father didn't just betray Walter. He betrayed me and all of Riverbend. And if Billy reveals the truth, this whole town will burn with you. The dead don't stalk the living, but sometimes their sons do. Night fell heavy over Riverbend. The air carried a dampness from the river, the kind that clung to your skin and made every shadow feel alive. Daniel stood on the porch of the guest house, lantern in hand, scanning the tree line. Ever since Boone's warning, he couldn't shake the sense that unseen eyes were studying his every move. Behind him, Clara's voice broke the silence. Come inside, Daniel. You won't find peace staring into the dark. He didn't answer. He thought he saw movement, a branch snapping, the silhouette of a man lingering between the oaks. But when he blinked, it was gone. Inside, Rebecca was already pacing. We can't just sit here waiting for him to strike. That's suicide. And what would you suggest? Clara snapped, her voice tired but sharp. March through town, guns raised like outlaws? Haven't we carried enough shame? Rebecca stopped pacing, fixing her sister with a steady look. Shame doesn't burn houses down, Clara. Billy Keene does. And if you think hiding in this guest house will keep him from finishing what he started, you're a fool. Daniel finally entered, setting down the lantern. His jaw was clenched. She's right. If Billy wants us, we can't wait. We have to find him before he finds us. Rebecca smirked, bitter. Spoken like your father. The words struck Daniel like a slap. I'm nothing like him. Not yet, she murmured almost to herself. The night dragged on with restless silence. Around midnight, Daniel couldn't sleep. He slipped outside again, the lighter burning in his pocket. He flicked it open, staring at the engraved WK. The initials glowed faintly in the flame's light, as if mocking him. Then, another sound, not the usual rustling of leaves, but deliberate, a twig snapping underfoot. Daniel turned sharply, scanning the darkness. Who's there? His voice cut through the stillness. Silence. Then, a faint chuckle, low and menacing, drifting from the tree line. The hairs on his arms rose. Daniel took a step forward, heart pounding. Show yourself! But the darkness swallowed the figure whole. The chuckle faded into the night, leaving only the whisper of the river. By morning, Daniel's nerves were raw. He told Boone what he had heard, but the sheriff only frowned. Billy's letting you know he's close. He's toying with you. That's his way. Clara trembled as she poured coffee. How long are we supposed to endure this? Boone sipped from his mug, eyes on Daniel. Until you make a choice. Either wait for him to strike or flush him out. Rebecca leaned back, arms crossed. "I say we end it. If Billy wants blood, we give him fire. Burn him out before he burns us again." Daniel stared at her, anger and fear warring inside him. "You speak of killing like it's nothing." Rebecca's gaze didn't flinch. "Because I've lived with the consequences of not acting. I left Riverbend because I saw what this feud was becoming. It won't stop unless someone ends it." Later that day, as Daniel walked through town, he felt the eyes of neighbors lingering too long, whispers curling in his wake. They knew something. Maybe they remembered Billy Keene. Maybe they knew the sins of James Whitmore better than he ever did. He passed the old general store, boarded up now, when a slip of paper caught his eye, pinned to the door with a rusted nail. He pulled it free. It was a photograph, faded with time. A younger James Whitmore stood shoulder to shoulder with Walter Keene, both smiling, both holding rifles as if carved from the same stone. On the back, scrawled in red ink, "Like father, like son, BK." Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked around, but the street was empty. No footsteps, no laughter. Just silence. Daniel clenched the photo, his jaw tight. If Billy was close enough to leave this message, then he wasn't just hiding in the shadows anymore. He was in Riverbend, watching every move they made. Sometimes the truth doesn't just wound, it stains the whole town. The photograph wouldn't leave Daniel's hand. He stared at it all night, the ink burning into his mind. Like father, like son. Sleep was impossible. He heard the creaks of the old guest house, the faint breathing of his mother in the next room, Rebecca's restless shifting. And under it all, a nagging question. Was Billy right? By dawn, he decided he needed answers. He walked into town again, this time straight to Sheriff Boone's home. The old man answered the door, rubbing at tired eyes. "You look like hell, boy," Boone muttered, letting him in. Daniel slapped the photograph on the table. "Explain this." Boone's eyes lingered on the picture. His hands shook just slightly as he traced the edges. "Lord help us," he whispered. "Stop hiding," Daniel snapped. "If you know what my father did, if this whole town knows, then tell me." Boone sighed, sinking into his chair. "Your father was many things. A leader, a provider. But James Whitmore had ambition, and ambition don't mix well with men like Walter Keene. They started with bootlegging, back when the town was dry. When the money flowed, they moved into running guns. Folks looked away, 'cause the town ate well. But when Walter wanted more, when he started talking about moving into flesh, your father drew the line." Daniel froze. "Flesh?" Boone's face was hard. "Trafficking. Women, children. That was Walter's vision. James refused, and that refusal lit the fuse. Some said James killed Walter to protect the town. Others said it was about money or power. Truth is, I never proved anything. But the night Walter vanished, blood was found on the riverbank. And your father came home with his clothes burned." Daniel's stomach turned. "And you all kept this quiet for decades?" Boone's eyes narrowed. "We kept this town alive. Without James, Riverbend would have been another graveyard. People forgave what they suspected. Because their bellies were full, their children clothed. You think you'd have grown up in peace if we'd ripped it open back then?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Peace built on lies isn't peace." Boone didn't answer. He looked old, tired, worn out by sins that didn't belong to just one man. When Daniel returned to the guest house, Rebecca was waiting on the porch. She read the anger on his face before he spoke. "He told you, didn't he?" "You knew?" Daniel accused. "I knew enough," she said softly. "It's why I left. I couldn't watch our family drown in that blood. Clara stayed, raising you in the shadow of James' reputation. She protected you from the truth, even if it meant losing me." Daniel looked at his mother, who stood silently inside, tears tracing her cheeks. "All my life," he said bitterly, "you let me believe he was a good man." Clara's voice shook. "Because I wanted you to be free of his sins. I wanted you to have a chance at a clean name." Rebecca's eyes hardened. "But Billy Keene won't let that happen. He's not after just revenge, he's after exposure. He'll tear down the Whitmores and the whole town with them." That night, as the family gathered around the dinner table in tense silence, a sound broke through. The crunch of footsteps on gravel outside. Daniel's head snapped up. Boone's warning rang in his ears. Slowly he rose, moving toward the door. He pushed it open and found a small package lying on the porch. No one was in sight. The street was empty, quiet, except for the whisper of the river in the distance. He picked up the box with trembling hands and brought it inside. Clara gasped as he unwrapped it. Inside was a blood-stained pocket watch, the initials JW engraved on its case. Daniel's father's watch, the one buried with him. Daniel stared in horror. If Billy Keene had dug up James Whitmore's grave, then this wasn't just a threat. It was desecration, and it meant Billy was closer than ever. Some graves hold more than bones. They hold the truths we bury to keep breathing. Daniel gripped the pocket watch so tightly it cut into his palm. His father's watch. The same one that had been lowered into the ground with James Whitmore years ago. Rebecca whispered, "He's sending a message." Clara covered her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. Why would he do this? Why desecrate a grave? Daniel's voice was low, rough. Because he wants us to know he can reach anywhere. Even the dead aren't safe. By morning, Boone was at the guest house. He stared at the pocket watch, his jaw clenched, his face pale. If Billy's gone to the cemetery, then he's already a step ahead. He knows your father's legacy is your weak point. He's not just after revenge, he's after collapse. Yours, Clara's, the whole town's. Daniel pushed past him. Then we go to the cemetery. Boone sighed, but nodded. You'd better be ready for what you might find. The three of them, Daniel, Boone, and Rebecca, made their way to the old Riverbend cemetery just as the sun dipped low. The place always carried a chill, the air heavy with moss and earth. Daniel's boots sank into the damp ground as they approached the Whitmore plot. And there it was, James Whitmore's grave, torn open like an insult. The coffin lid splintered, earth scattered. The ground smelled of decay and smoke. Daniel froze. God Almighty! Rebecca put a hand to her mouth. He really did it. Boone stepped forward, shining his lantern into the open grave. It ain't just desecration, he muttered. It's theater. Inside the broken coffin lay bones, what was left of James. But across the chest, nailed crudely into the ribcage, was another photograph. Daniel climbed down into the grave with shaking hands, pulling it free. The photo was old, edges curled with time. It showed a group of men gathered at the riverbank, rifles slung over their shoulders, bottles of whiskey at their feet. Among them, James Whitmore and Walter Keene, both smiling, both alive, both allies. Scrawled beneath in the same red ink, they built this town together. They bled it dry together. Daniel's stomach twisted. What does this mean? Boone's face was hard. It means James and Walter weren't enemies from the start. They were partners. Billy's showing you that your father didn't just refuse corruption. He shared in it, maybe more than you'd like to believe. Rebecca shook her head. So all those years, the feud, the killings, all built on a lie? Daniel climbed out of the grave, fists clenched. No, there has to be more. Boone, you said my father drew the line. Boone didn't meet his eyes. That's what I believed. But Billy's trying to prove otherwise. And I'll tell you this, he wouldn't go to these lengths unless he had proof. Suddenly, a sound snapped through the silence. Laughter. Not distant, not imagined, but close. The three of them froze, lantern light flickering across gravestones. Billy, Boone muttered, hand inching toward his revolver. The laughter echoed from the tree line beyond the cemetery, taunting, mocking. Then, just as quickly as it came, it faded into the night. Daniel shouted into the darkness. You think this scares me? You think desecrating graves makes you a man? His voice cracked, his anger spilling over. Face me! Only silence answered. They returned to the guest house shaken. Clara was waiting, her hands trembling as she took one look at her son's ashen face. What did you find? Daniel set the photograph down on the table. Clara's knees buckled and she sank into a chair. Dear God! Rebecca leaned over her sister. Clara, you knew about this, didn't you? Clara didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the smiling face of James Whitmore, standing arm in arm with Walter Keene. Daniel turned to his mother, voice cold. Tell me the truth. Were you part of this too? The deepest betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from those we love. The guest house fell into silence, the weight of the photograph pressing on them all. James Whitmore, Walter Keene, side by side, bound in a brotherhood of crime. Daniel's voice cut through the stillness, low and sharp. "Tell me, Mother, what did you know?" Clara's lips trembled. For years she had held the town together with silence. But now the grave was open, the ghosts awake, and there was no more hiding. She clasped her hands tight, knuckles white. "Your father," she began, voice hoarse, "was not the man you believed him to be. He and Walter started together, two young men with big dreams, hungry to make Riverbend more than a dying mill town. They thought bootlegging was harmless. They told themselves it was survival. And yes, I knew." Daniel staggered back, betrayal sharp in his chest. "You knew he was a criminal, and you let me worship him as a hero." Tears slid down Clara's cheeks. "I wanted you to remember the man who held you when you were born, who built this house with his own hands, not the man who came home late with liquor on his breath and blood on his shirt." Rebecca's voice was brittle. "You chose silence over truth, and look where it's brought us." Daniel's fists tightened. "And what about Walter's disappearance? Did you know about that too?" Clara closed her eyes. For a long time she didn't speak. Then, softly, "The night Walter vanished, your father came to me. He was shaking. He smelled of smoke. He told me it was over, that Walter had gone too far, that he had no choice but to stop him. He said if the truth came out, it would destroy us all. I never asked for details. I never wanted to." Daniel felt sick. "So you've lived with this for decades, carrying his lies?" Clara nodded. "Not just his lies. Mine. Because when you asked about him, when you wanted stories, I painted him in gold. I gave you the father I wished you had, not the one you really did." Rebecca's eyes burned. "And what about me, Clara? You let me carry the shame alone when I tried to leave. You made me the outcast while you held your perfect picture of James." Clara's voice cracked. "Because if I admitted the truth to you, I'd have to admit it to myself." The air was heavy with sorrow, thick enough to choke on. Daniel wanted to hate her, wanted to scream, but all he could do was whisper, "So everything I believed was a lie." Boone, who had stood silently in the corner, finally spoke. "The truth don't erase who your father was to you, but Billy knows now that the cracks are wide open. He'll press them until you break." At that moment, a sharp knock rattled the door. Everyone froze. Daniel rose, his heart hammering. He opened the door slowly. On the porch sat another package, smaller this time, wrapped in brown paper, no sign of who left it. He carried it inside and unwrapped it with shaking hands. Inside was a revolver, rusted and stained. Alongside it, a single bullet. And a note. "This is the gun that killed Walter Keene. One bullet missing. Ask your mother who pulled the trigger." Daniel turned slowly toward Clara. Her face went pale, her lips parted, but no words came. Rebecca whispered, horrified, "Clara, was it you?" One truth can shatter a family more than a lifetime of lies. The revolver sat on the table like a serpent, coiled and waiting. The note beside it glared in Daniel's eyes until his vision blurred. Rebecca's whisper echoed, "Clara, was it you?" Clara reached for the table to steady herself, her fingers trembling. "No," she said at last, her voice strained. "No, I did not kill Walter Keene." Daniel leaned forward, anger raw in his chest. "Then tell us, who did? Because Billy sure as hell wants us to believe it was you. And right now, I don't know what to believe anymore." Clara's gaze fell to the revolver. That night, James came home wild-eyed, his hands covered in dirt. He put that gun on the kitchen table, the same as you see it now. He told me Walter was gone, that I must never ask where, that our survival depended on silence. I begged him to explain. He only said one thing. "I pulled the trigger so you and the children could live." Silence filled the room. Rebecca stared, stricken. Daniel's chest tightened with a mix of rage and grief. Boone finally exhaled, breaking the stillness. "Then Billy's right. Your father did kill Walter." Clara shook her head sharply. "You don't understand. James was broken that night, like a man carrying another's sin. And the way he said it? I've spent 40 years wondering if it was true, or if he was protecting someone else." Rebecca frowned. "Protecting who?" Clara looked between them, her face pale. There were whispers back then, men who stood at Walter's side, men who hated James for pulling away. I think James took the blame to shield us all, maybe even to shield me. Daniel's voice cracked. Shield you from what? Before she could answer, the lamp flickered. A thud sounded outside, heavy against the porch. Boone reached for the revolver, loading the single bullet with steady hands. Stay here, he ordered. Daniel ignored him and moved to the window. On the porch lay another envelope, pinned beneath a rock. The handwriting matched the note. He tore it open. Inside was a torn scrap of an old police report, yellowed with age. It read, Suspect, Clara Whitmore. Seen arguing with Walter Keene, night of disappearance. Gunfire reported near the river. Case closed for lack of evidence. Daniel's hands shook as he read aloud. Rebecca gasped. Boone's face turned grim. Clara sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. They questioned me back then. I swore I never pulled a gun. James took the blame so they'd stop looking at me. He said no one would believe a woman's innocence when two families wanted blood. Daniel stared at her, torn between fury and pity. So all these years you've lived with the world thinking maybe you were a killer. Clara's eyes glistened. And maybe deep down, part of me believed it too, because that night is a blur. Walter came to the house, drunk, violent. He threatened us. Me, you, even James. I fought him. There was a struggle. Then the gun went off. I remember the sound, the smoke, the silence afterward. James told me to go upstairs, to never speak of it again. And I did, for the rest of my life. Rebecca's breath caught. Dear God, Clara, you think you might have killed him yourself? Clara's silence was the only answer she could give. Daniel turned away, gripping the mantelpiece so hard his knuckles went white. The past, the lies, the shadows, they were all swallowing him whole. Then Boone stepped forward. Billy knows every piece of this. He's not just attacking your family. He's rewriting the town's history, and if we don't stop him soon, he'll bury you with it. A crash suddenly shattered the night, the sound of breaking glass. They spun around. The window above Clara's chair had been smashed. On the floor lay a bottle, flames already licking from the rag stuffed inside. The fire spread fast, devouring the curtains. Clara screamed as Daniel and Rebecca rushed to stamp it out. Boone fired the revolver into the night, the echo splitting the darkness. From outside, Billy's voice called through the flames. Confess, Clara. Confess before the whole town, or I'll burn Riverbend to ashes. A secret kept inside four walls can still poison an entire town. The flames sputtered out under Daniel's frantic efforts, the curtains smoldering in a heap on the floor. Smoke curled through the guest house, stinging their eyes, leaving the bitter stench of warning behind. From outside, Billy's voice rose again, colder, steadier. You think you can hide, Whitmores? Tomorrow, everyone in Riverbend will know what you are. His footsteps crunched over gravel, fading into the night. Daniel stared after him through the shattered window, jaw clenched. He's not bluffing. He'll take this to the town square if he has to. Rebecca turned sharply to Clara. If the truth is going to come out, wouldn't it be better that it come from us first? Clara pressed her hands over her face. Do you think they'll listen? They've hated this family since before you were born. They'll swallow every lie he feeds them. Boone, still holding the smoking revolver, spoke gravely. The people of Riverbend don't care about truth. They care about the story that makes sense to them. And Billy's been telling his side a long time. The next morning, his words proved true. The Whitmores awoke to find the town buzzing. Flyers littered Main Street, tacked to telephone poles, pinned to shop windows. Each bore the same headline, scrawled in thick ink. The Whitmores killed Walter Keene. Below it, Billy had printed the police report scrap, Clara's name underlined in red. The effect was devastating. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. At the general store, whispers followed Clara like shadows. Men spat in the dirt when Daniel passed. Even old friends kept their heads down. Rebecca's face burned with anger. He's made you the villain, and now the town is turning the knife. Daniel clenched his fists. I won't let him destroy us. If they want the truth, they'll hear it from me. That evening he climbed the steps of the church, where townsfolk gathered for a hastily called meeting. The air inside buzzed with gossip, suspicion, and the smell of sweat. Every pew was filled. At the front stood Billy, his voice rich with false sorrow. For decades, Billy declared, This town has been haunted by one crime, the disappearance of my Uncle Walter, and now we know why. The Whitmores silenced him, buried him, and fed us lies. Ask yourselves, how many of our troubles come from their hands?" The crowd murmured, nodding, anger rising like a tide. Daniel couldn't bear it. He strode down the aisle, his voice breaking across the church. "Enough!" All eyes turned to him. His heart pounded, but he forced the words out. "You've been told half a story. You've been fed lies wrapped in just enough truth to taste sweet. My father was not perfect. My mother, she is no murderer. The night Walter vanished, violence came to our door. Threats, a struggle, a gunshot. But my parents carried the blame to protect this town from tearing itself apart." Billy smirked, stepping closer. "So you admit it. You admit your family pulled the trigger." Daniel shook his head. "I admit only this. None of you know the whole truth. Not me, not my mother, not even Billy. But he's using your anger to burn Riverbend down." The church erupted into argument, voices clashing, some shouting for justice, others calling for calm. Boone rose from the back, his frail voice carrying surprising weight. "I was sheriff then. I failed you all by letting the truth rot in silence. If blood was spilled that night, it wasn't the Whitmores alone who carried the blame. It was all of us who looked away." The room quieted, stunned, Billy's face twisted with rage. He pounded his fist on the pulpit. "Lies! He's covering for them even now. The Whitmores are poison, and I'll prove it once and for all." With a flourish, Billy reached into his coat and pulled out a rusted key. He held it high for the crowd to see. "This," he shouted, "opens the cellar beneath the Whitmore house, and when I show you what's buried there, you'll know who the real murderers are." Gasps filled the church. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He had never seen that key before. But if Billy truly had it, what secrets lay beneath the old house? Clara whispered, barely audible, "Dear God, what did James hide down there? Some truths are heavier than graves, and some lies burn longer than fire." The key turned in the lock with a rasping protest. Daniel's hands were clammy, his chest tightened. The cellar door creaked open, revealing darkness thick as tar. The smell of damp earth and decay drifted upward. Billy's triumphant grin faltered slightly under the weight of anticipation. "Behold," he said, gesturing theatrically, "the proof of your family's sins." Boone held the revolver loosely but stayed close to Daniel and Clara. Rebecca's hand squeezed Clara's, grounding her. They descended the creaking stairs, flashlights cutting narrow beams through the gloom. Dust motes danced like ghosts in the shafts of light. At the bottom the cellar spread wide, shelves lined with old crates and rusted tools. In the far corner lay a loose floorboard, slightly raised, as if inviting discovery. Billy knelt, forcing the board upward. Inside was a small chest, locked with a padlock. With the same key, he opened it slowly, savoring the moment. Inside, nothing. A gasp escaped Rebecca. Daniel stared at the empty chest, Clara's eyes filled with tears. Billy's face contorted. "Nothing? This is impossible. This key was passed down by my uncle's papers. There has to be." Daniel stepped forward. "You've been looking in the wrong place, Billy." He bent to the side and pressed a hidden latch beneath the floor. A second compartment, smaller and narrow, popped open. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, tied with a faded ribbon. Clara recognized them immediately. James's letters. "My father's," he wrote to Walter. He tried to make amends. Daniel untied the ribbon and read aloud. The words painted a tale of fear, regret, and protection. James had confronted Walter the night he died. Walter had lunged for the gun. In the struggle, the shot had been accidental. James had hidden the body in the river, hoping no one would ever find him, fearing that Billy's family might retaliate violently. James then spent decades shielding Clara and the children from the truth, carrying the burden alone. Boone's eyes glistened. "He bore this so the town wouldn't fracture, so you could live without suspicion." Rebecca turned to Clara. "Your father loved you enough to take the blame for a life he could never reclaim." Clara whispered, voice breaking, "He saved me. All these years, he saved me." Billy trembled with rage and disbelief. "You're lying. This clears them? After everything?" Daniel's voice was steady, iron hard. "It clears no one of fear, Billy. It clears no one of grief, but it reveals the truth. The rest, how Riverbend reacts, how we live, depends on what we do next. For the first time in years, Billy faltered. The crowd from the church had followed, pressing into the cellar doorway, faces pale, uncertain. The townsfolk had come, seeking scandal, but found something else, the fragile, painful weight of reality. Clara stood tall. We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring Walter back. But we can choose mercy, choose to end the cycle of hatred he tried to ignite. Billy dropped the letters to the floor. You'll regret this. His voice was low, defeated. Daniel nodded to Boone. Let him go. Riverbend doesn't need another body to carry its shame. Outside, the sun rose over the river, its light scattering across the town, touching the rooftops, the streets, the houses. For the first time in decades, Riverbend seemed quiet. Not empty, not fearful, but cautious, as if the town itself had held its breath. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from her chest. Daniel and Rebecca flanked her. She whispered, almost to herself, James's secret. It cost us everything, but it saved us too. Boone looked around, his gaze lingering on the river. Some sins stay buried, not because they're forgotten, but because someone had the courage to carry them. The town might never fully forgive, might never forget. But the Whitmores, at least, had the chance to survive, to grieve, and finally, to begin healing. In the ashes of Riverbend's old grudges, something fragile, human, and enduring remained. The possibility of forgiveness, the resilience of a family, and the truth, finally, laid bare.